Samanani Dumelang, everybody. It is your girl Nthabiseng Mabuya, and today we have a special addition to our episode. We are going to be speaking about the IAC exam, and we have a panelist, and we're going to introduce them. They're going to introduce themselves one by one and tell us who they are and why they're here today. We'll start with Tosh.
Okay, hi everybody, Sanbonani. My name is Nthabiseng, but known as Dosh. I'm in the Auditor General, right? So I work for the Learning Experiences BU. I'm responsible for technical trainings in the organization, but I sit here before you guys today as an IAC marker, just to give you guys a bit of tips here and there on how to approach the exams. Thank you.
And hello everyone, my name is Ndima. I am the audit senior within the organization, and I just recently passed my IAC now in Jan. And yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
Hello everyone, so my name is Remember Mrauzi. I am an academic trainee at the University of Johannesburg. I've just also recently passed my IAC in Jan. So I'm responsible for content creation at the University of Johannesburg, responsible for tutorials, for moderation of papers and so forth. So I'm hoping that my experience would aid in your guys' needs.
So as you can see, our panelists, all of them have written the ITC/IAC exam. So we have some expertise with regards to that. So without wasting any time, we're going to go into the first question. So what we did is that we took a survey and we asked IAC candidates who wrote the exam in January, and they gave us the questions beforehand so that we can make the session a productive and effective one to help you in your June IAC sitting. So Luyanda, the first question goes to you, and it says, how do you prepare for the IAC exam while working, balancing work and studies?
Oh, thank you, Ntabi, for the question. I think from my side, what's important is just setting boundaries, more especially with the colleagues or with your colleagues, your managers, your AMs and everyone. It is very important that they do know what times they could reach to you or they should reach to you. At AGSA, I think we all know that the start time for work is 7:30 until 4:15. So after those, outside those hours, no one is supposed to be calling you or asking you about working papers or work whatsoever. So from my side, or what I did or worked for me, I set boundaries. I made sure that my people that I'm working with or my team that I'm working with, they do not contact me in those times. The first thing that I did, I had to understand myself to say that how many hours am I gonna have to be able to maximize and to be productive, and as I was working on my studies. And in the mornings, I would wake up in the mornings. The first thing that I do, I wake up at 4 o'clock. The first thing that I do, I take a shower. That is very important. Because if you don't take a shower, you always want to go. Yeah, you always want to go back. Say, oh, it's still very cold, and I need maybe like if I can take 5 minutes, nyana, 10 minutes, nyana, for me. And then I'll just wake up, I can take a shower, and then you sit on your desk. And then you just work on that until it's that time for you to prepare to go, to prepare for work, and then you go to work. After that, or when you come back from work, what I did was to make sure that I mark or continue with what I was doing in the morning, and no one was disturbing me in those times. And what is also important on this is that you make sure if you have got an issue with your phone, you need to put your phone away. I used to tell my roommate that please, or my flatmate, please take the phone away. You're gonna give me at 10 o'clock in the evening, so that I don't have access to my phone. I don't have to go on WhatsApp and watch TikTok and so forth. So I think that is what is mostly important, to make sure that you balance your studies and also your work life.
Thanks, Lou. And I think boundaries are very important. And if you know that you are easily distracted, I like the fact that you would give your flatmate your phone.
Yes.
Because Instagram, TikTok, you'll always be there. I remember I always found myself watching the reels and everything, and also Netflix and Showmax.
Ooh.
It slaps when you have something to do.
Very interesting things there.
So
on
listen,
Netflix.
you will find episodes to watch because you want to procrastinate. So if you're a procrastinator, just make sure that you are just, putting the distractions aside. And then the next question goes to Remember. What are the study techniques you used, and where do I start with my revision? Do I go back to my study notes, or do I go straight into past papers?
So I mean, it depends. For me, I rank topics according to how difficult they are, but also I rank topics according to how comfortable I am with reference to those topics. So I mean, there's no one who doesn't necessarily know something in a content.
Yeah.
So better you look at IAS 16 and you say, what do I not know in IAS 16? What do I not know in IFRS 16? So you look at those specific things that you don't know first and you revise those first. So for me, it was very important to first figure out what do I not know, what am I uncomfortable with, and do that for revision. But then when it came to like your past papers and so forth, you can do your revision while you're doing those questions.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that was very important for me, is to look at questions that are integrative in nature, that almost test all or a various of topics. So when I look at that, what I'm doing is, yes, I'm doing a past question, but with principles in mind. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna see, this question was testing this principle, but here it didn't test this and this and that. What are the exceptions? What could have been, the other possible scenario, and how do I prepare for that? So I think the revision is mostly on things that you're uncomfortable with, and then when you do past papers or past questions, you're doing that with the revision mindset, where you then revise the topics that you are comfortable with and so forth.
And maybe just to add on what remember I just said, I think also it is very important to just you also ask yourself those questions where, or if, let's say for instance, when you are revising past papers, they ask an IFRS 15 question, and then you get to ask yourself, how else could they ask this question? Or what are other principles that were not asked on this paper? So that if you do the next paper and it asks exactly what you thought about on the previous paper, it's easier for you to be able to move on with the question.
I strongly agree, because I think it all comes down to knowing exactly what the core principle of that specific standard is, so that if the examiner is trying to trick you basically and ask the question in a different way, you're still able to answer because you understand the core foundation of that specific standard. Then the next question goes to Ntosh. It says, how do you maximize marks in the IAC in terms of time management, and since there is no longer an allocated reading time?
All right, no, thanks a lot then, Tabi. I think with maximizing marks, the most important thing that a candidate can do is ensure that they attempt all the questions. I think that's very, very important. Once you don't attempt all the questions, you are making yourself at a point where you are doubting whether you've gone through the pass line or not. That's the most important question, right? I think the second one is always look for easy marks, right? I think that each question has those easy marks that you can tackle first, and once you get those, it boosts your confidence as well. You are able to continue now writing this paper, believing that you know what you can actually achieve more, right? So that's the second one. And then the third one, you must allocate time to each question. When you allocate the time to the question, you make sure that you stick within that time. And then lastly, try and make sure that you get yourself above the pass mark, right? So if you are answering a required and the marks are 10, right? Make sure that you aim for 6 or 7 and then you move on. Because once you have those, you've maximized the marks and you've also stuck to the time that it was allocated for you to finish. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I think just to add on, if you're going to allocate time for each question, make sure that you leave at least 10 minutes at the end of the paper so that you can go back to questions that you still have to top up on. Because I think having that 10 minutes time bank is going to help you to just top up the marks, because now if maybe question 1 is not going well, that 10 minutes will allow you to just go back to it. So thank you for that. And then we're going to go back to Luyanda. It says here, as a candidate who wrote both ITC and IAC, what changes did you make in your study approach, and how were you able to boost your confidence as a repeat candidate?
Yeah, thanks, Nthabi. I think firstly, I had to reflect, on my mistakes that I have done when I was writing ITC, and then I needed to make sure that I don't repeat those mistakes when I am preparing for IAC. Nice, right? ITC, IAC. So I think the first mistake that I have done, it was the fact that after I wrote my CTA exams, I relaxed and I was like, no, it's fine, I'll remember everything that I was doing when I'm writing ITC. And when I passed CTA, I was super excited that, oh, I passed. And even when I'm studying, you know, I was doing an aha method most of the time because, no, I know these things. I just wrote my exams. And then, boom, when I was writing exams, then I'm like, oh, I was not prepared for this because I did not practice thoroughly. You know, I was not applying myself. I was doing an aha method. So now I needed to make changes when I was preparing for IAC. When I was preparing for IAC, as remember said, I had to sit down to say that which, on all the modules, I had to categorize them to say my knowledge, high, medium, and low. And I know the ones that are on low, I have to prioritize them. And at least they must move from low to medium. All the ones that are also on medium, I have to move them to high as well. And then I ensured that, also I had to reflect on the previous paper that I wrote on ITC. When I went through my script, and that exam paper was like, oh, I don't know what I was writing here. And then I literally even had to ask people, you know what I did? I think the power of when you do not know something and you ask someone to say, can you please just sit with me? I know you are good with accounting. I know you are good with management accounting. Can we sit down and then just, can we go through the script and just, can you evaluate me? This is what I know about myself, but it also appreciate if you tell me from your perspective. And it was super beautiful because the people that were assisting me, they would just take me through, say that you did not know this. How did you not answer this thing? Because it's easy. So the reflection was super perfect. It was just on another level, and it just prepared me to be able to go for IAC. You know, yeah, I think that's it from my side.
And how were you able to boost your confidence?
Ooh. I think when as I was doing my revision, especially I would mark myself. I needed to make sure that I don't give myself. I'll ask if would the marker give me this or not, and then like no, I did not want to be lenient with myself. No, I wouldn't. And then I'll mark and then just see how far I am. If I got a 30%, I think I'll be very worried about that. But as I was practicing and time goes, I would see that now I'm getting 80s and I'm like, oh, you know what? I am ready. Actually, Psycha should just give me this thing. I am ready to be an APC candidate. Yes. It boosts your confidence when you see that there is progress, especially on those topics that they were on low, and then now you know that you are moving to high when you're creating your knowledge.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. Because starting with topics that you are not familiar with and things that are your weakness, it's better to start with that, because when you get to the ones that are your strengths, you become confident in yourself that, okay, now I'm confident enough to write it. But also don't forget words of affirmation, guys. I think we always very hard on ourselves, and we're always saying that, you know, maybe we're not going to make it because you failed. So make sure that you're lenient on yourself. You're telling yourself, listen, I know the work, but I just need to identify the issue. I need to identify where my lows are, like Lou mentioned. Then we're going to go back to Ntosh. How to approach an audit scenario and how to identify triggers in the scenario.
Okay, thanks, Nthabi. I think another thing that our candidates, especially in the organization, underestimate, we are an auditing institution.
Of course.
So I think you need to really remember that, right? And also, in terms of identifying the scenario and the triggers, I always say, look at the different phases of the audit. Where are we, right? Mm-hmm. Are we at planning? Are we at risk assessment? Are we at execution? Are we at reporting, right? So look at the different phases, try and understand exactly where we are, and then link it back to the ISAs, which ISAs are applicable, right? And then just bring it home and say, which working papers within the organization do we use for this particular phase, right? And then have a look at those working papers, right? Read those working papers. If you are planning, for example, and there's materiality issues that are being discussed in the scenario, be aware of what materiality working paper looks like at the back of your mind, so that you are able to actually tackle this question, right? I think there are slides that we presented to you guys when we were doing meeting, and we showed them the different phases, the different ISA standards, the different working papers that we actually have that they can actually make use of. So they mustn't underestimate where we are and what we do as an organization.
I might have a testimony from what she is saying.
Come on.
I think I'll just make an example, more especially with auditing questions. You know, most of the marks, they come from what we are doing during planning, especially the lead schedules, right? Because you just get all the marks, you maximise 8 marks on just general procedures, even before attempting the substantive procedures if the question that's what it was asking. Because if you look into our lead schedules, you have to look into your general ledger, your TB, your AFS, prior your working papers. You need to look at the framework. If it has changed from last year, or the accounting policy has it changed from prior year to this year, and then it just you get all those marks for free because of what you do on a daily basis. So those are the things that you just need to make sure that how do you structure them, and you need to make sure that they are in point form. You don't repeat or write 2 points in one point. So that is true, Dosh. Thank you so much about that.
Yeah, so it's basically bringing audit back to life and bringing it back into a practical sense, because you do this every day. So just go back to that working paper and just, figure out where you are in the audit process. And then the next question is for Loom. What do you do a week before the exam to ensure that you are mentally prepared?
Yeah, okay. What is important is because you've been working so hard, making sure when you are practicing, you practice under exam conditions, and you're timing yourself, and you get exhausted, So the week before the exams, you need to take it down a bit. What we would do, I remember because I had to move from Pretoria to Kimberley when I was preparing for IAC. So what we would do, we would watch movies sometimes.
Okay.
We would do just a smaller thing or a question, and even when we're doing those questions, we don't do them under exam or tight exam conditions. Just read through the scenario, and then you just have to write down your thinking process. Say, okay, this is what I was going to approach. This is how I was going to approach the question. These are the points that I need to mention, and then you go to the solution. And then you're able to say, okay, I think I got this, or I did not get this one. And then you just focus on it to say, okay, this is how they structured their answer. And then after that, you watch a movie. I think you just need to take it easy and relax. Also, don't put a lot of pressure to you and you need to believe in yourself at that point in time. Say, I know everything and I am ready. It's just a matter of Psycha just says, you have passed.
I love that. Because being in a good emotional state is going to help you pass. Because imagine you work so hard for, let's say, a month, and then when you get to the exam, you're crashing because emotionally you're not okay. That's not something that you want to happen to yourself. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
And you can crash because, remember, if you are still doing the questions under exam condition and there's something that throws you off, it will take your confidence down. You'll be like, I don't know this, and I'm writing in 3 days or in 4 days to come. So it is very important that you take it down a bit. We're using mostly, I think we will call it an AHA method, because you just read through the scenario, you just jot down how you were going to approach the question, then you look into the solution. Voila, you're happy. It will boost your confidence. I think also the trick that I was using some omega-3 supplements. Because remember, omega-3 is very rich with, I think, with follicle acids that they help you with memory, to be able to remember things. It is very important because to use them, or for me, they really assisted me. Sometimes when I started using them, when I would sleep and not remembering something, and then when I would wake up and I know what I was supposed to say in that question, and I would just wake up and just make sure that I write that thing. So and also on our nutrition or what we eat does not normally contain a lot of omega-3. So I think it's very important if you don't eat a lot of fish or your tuna and everything, is very important for you just to have those. It just it helps you to be able to remember, and it boosts your mental health and yeah.
So there you have it, right? Make sure that you're watching what you eat. You can't be eating papa, Russian chips. You're gonna fall asleep. So just make sure that you're boosting yourself with omega-3. And the next question will go to Remember. What are the tips on answering a theory question?
Theory question. I think for me, what I've come to understand about theory question is that the context in which the scenario is built upon paves a way for you to answer this question. You're not gonna answer blindly off of something that you must think off of your head. You're gonna extract whatever they've told you in the scenario, use that towards the required. So sort of the required will ask you, this is what we want from you. And then you go into the scenario, you look for the triggers that help you impact what they want. So they're not gonna give you clearly in such a way that you can extract it as is and just put it the way that it's going to, you've taken it from the scenario. You're gonna just take that, use that, impact it, and make it link to the requirement. So what I've done is, during my reading time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the theory required clearly and try to internalize it. And then when I go back to the scenario, I'm highlighting maybe in pink for specific triggers that I'm gonna use to answer that required. Maybe it's an additional factors question, it's a finance question, there's a merger and acquisition, they're asking you, what are the additional factors that need to be taken into account in terms of this merger and acquisition? Now when you're going back, you're highlighting each and every trigger that relates to things that affect mergers and acquisition. And when you go there, you're impacting that, because mostly what candidates do, at least in CTA, what they do is they'll write the trigger, but then how does this trigger then relate to what we've asked you is very important. So for me, that is the first thing now, understanding that all my tools that I'm going to use in this question, I'm going to find in the scenario. But also secondly, understanding that I have to address quantum over depth.
Yeah.
So the idea is, if I look at a required, and this is what it's asking me, and I identify a point, and the point maybe is the fact that maybe the financial statements or the financial results are not complete,
Yes.
I can't run 4 points on that. Because then what I'm doing is, I'm misleading myself into thinking that I have enough points when I
Yes,
don't have
true.
enough points. So the idea is, I look at quantum, I address all the points that exist, and then maybe afterwards, then I can add some of the few that I think should be additionals on top of other points that I've already added. So to avoid the risk now of writing 4 points under one item. So that's just something for me that I use. But if whatever I'm answering doesn't identify the trigger or doesn't impact the trigger, then I must understand that I haven't answered the question. I mean, the question is, so what? This is happening, so what? What will it affect? What is the impact on your analysis? So I think addressing those two things for me would help in answering a theoretical question. I'm not sure if
Thank
Let
you
me
so
just
much.
add, please, there on what Remember has said. I think we can pick up a candidate who is going to pass a theory question and a candidate who's not. It's the application element. Because you find a lot of candidates, they will just take whatever is written in the standard and bring it to their solution. But you look at the application impact in terms of what the scenario is saying and what is also in your solution. Then you find a lot of students are not even maximizing marks because they are just giving you theory and they are not actually applying what is sitting in the scenario. I think another thing that I wanted to add was to say, when you were talking about the volume, you are right when you are saying you can write 5 points under one requirement, right? And you don't get a lot of marks. So candidates must try, if a requirement maybe has 4 items that it needs, each part 3 or 4 points and move on, 3 or 4 points and move on. So at least you cover everything that is required in that particular required, then you are able to pass. Yeah.
And also, may I also please add, I think when you are answering a theory question, it's very important to plan actually. So that you know how you are going to scatter your points around. But if we can just look into accounting, because I struggled with the accounting, especially theory questions in account or financial reporting. So a mentor of mine just told me that, when you are going to answer a theory question in accounting, let's say for instance a question is asking you about presentation and disclosure, or it is asking about classification, you don't just classify something. You start with initial recognition. And there's the initial measurement, subsequent measurement. That is how you structure your answers until you get to classification. And then you also marks they are going to guide you so that you don't say a lot on the top parts. And then you just make sure that also when you get to classification, then you are going to have a lot to say, because that is where the marks are going to be. But you can't just go and classify whereas you have not recognized something. It was not there and. Before classification, there is initial recognition. There's also other steps, and the standard that does guide you on how you need to follow, how to answer a financial reporting question.
I think also the other thing is, understanding that mostly the theory isn't going to give you marks.
Yeah.
So theorize as you apply would be the better approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we must see your theory in your application. We must not see your theory hanging in the air.
Yes.
So if you, and also this is guided by the mark allocation, of course, because maybe if it's a 7 marker, you know the approach that you're going to follow, you know how many points that you're going to have there. But understanding that, you know, putting theory alone and then putting the application might also mislead you into thinking you are scoring more marks. So it's better to always apply while you are theorizing, that they see your theory in your application.
Yo, this was a question that was thoroughly unpacked. You see, I told you we have experts when it comes to IAC. And I think I just want to add on your point, remember, when you were speaking about highlighting. For me, colors really worked. And when you highlight, you get to go back to see, okay, this is what I need to actually add. And sometimes you can color code. So I used to use pink for risks. When I see risks, I know that, okay, this is pink. So that when I'm answering, I know that I need to pull those risks into, you know, the answering. And then if maybe it's a trigger that I need to include into the let's say, supporting evidence, especially with regards to consider qualitative considerations. That's the question that used to deter me a bit. So I used to highlight in yellow to be like, okay, add this. So that when they say, in addition to the evaluations question that you have, what other things must you consider? Then already you have a list. You don't have to go back and reread what you read already, because you obviously forgot, right? So the highlighters will really help you keep track of what you've read. So I think you've thoroughly unpacked it. Ntosh, so the candidates asked, as a candidate, how does one do a self-review on their own script?
Okay, this is the repeat candidates now, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's important here, the approach would be, go back to the scenario, read it in its entirety, right? As if you are doing it for the first time. And then go to the solution, read the solution, and then compare it with what you answered, right? And then at that point, you need to have an honest conversation with yourself. Don't lie to yourself, because this is between you now and stepping over this IAC milestone, right? Have an honest conversation with yourself. How did I lose these marks, right? What is it that I misunderstood that was required of me? Or is it because of a knowledge gap that I need to go back and brush up on? Or it's just a topic that I saw for the first time in the exam, which is never the case. You never see something new there for the first time, right? But they'll obviously trick you here and there, but it's not going to be new, right? And then now highlight those issues, right? The topics that you are struggling with, go back to the principles, right? Go back to the principles. I think, remember, you did say there are areas where we are strong at. There's someone who's excellent at text, someone who's also excellent at accounting, right? So the ones that you are weak on, right? Those lows, go back and revisit those. I used to struggle with Mac. I remember when I was doing my studies, Mac used to trap at me. But I made sure that, you know what, a day cannot end without me polishing that relationship with Mac, right? Even if it's just a 5 marks question, 10 marks question, it gave me the confidence. As I did it every day, I knew by the time I get to the exam, chances of me passing are well ahead than I was at the beginning of the year. And I always say, you can't focus on topics that you already know. What you already know, you know. There's nothing new that you can learn. So we do that because sometimes we want to give ourselves the confidence, you need the comfort to say, I know I'm good at auditing, I know how to design my procedures. You always look for questions that are going to ask you to design procedures. You're going to ace them, but then now you are failing behind on the ones that you don't know. Have an honest conversation and go for the ones that really trap you, because they are going to trap you again in the exam, right? So make sure that you cement on those ones. Don't play there. Yeah.
I'll also like to add on what Ntosh said. I think the powerful reflection, I think it's a hard pill to swallow, because when you go back to your script, I myself, I was like, yo, what was happening with me? Because, and it was really a difficult pill to swallow, because when I'm going through my script and looking at the solution, but I of course, I'm putting fail. Because what was I thinking here? What was going on here? And when I went back, I even saw that I realized that I did not even understand the scenario. I was not comprehending with the scenario. But you can only get to see that through reflection and
Through
doing that hard part of looking at your script and also comparing it to the solution. And you just need to go back and reflect and look into those why, how, and when you are formulating your procedures.
And then the next question is for you, Lou.
Okay.
So how different is the style of testing from ITC to IAC?
Okay. I think because I also did write ITC and also had the privilege of being part of IAC. So when I reflect into ITC was a theoretical exam. It was basically an academic exam that is based on CTA, right? But now when we look into IAC is a bit professional, practical, and it mostly, I think, it makes sure that with IAC they do make sure that there is an application of the CA 2025 framework, of which ITC was not doing that. Now when we are talking about CA 2025 framework, we're looking into PVAs. They look into your critical thinking, your integration thinking, and your communication skills. You name them. I think we all know that. We all know those. So that is how IAC is structured. And also, what was intriguing, I think we all know that our profession is the cornerstone of our profession is ethics. So now SAICA is mostly also making sure that they do address ethics. Right, and they need you to just, when you are answering those, or you are answering those the ethics question, you apply yourself and you also apply what is happening on the industry that you are tested on, right? And it is, I think, now that I am also part of APT, it's just a bit similar with how I believe that APC will be like when they ask those the ethics questions there, right? Yeah. That is the difference. And also the way that now I think we all know that ITC we would write on within 2 days and we have 4 papers. Now with IAC you have got 3 papers, you write from 8 until 1 and then you are done. Oh, that was nice. You don't have to go back 4 at home. But one you are done and then you just go back home and then you relax, you know. And also now you're writing out of 120 marks. And most of the marks, or some of the marks, they come from those PVAs, you know, those critical thinking, communication skills, and so forth. So I think that is the difference between ITC and IAC. And then another part is that now we are with IAC, you get you're required with your scenario, and however, and also I think SAICA now is just. So you're an adult now, you know, take care of your business. I will give you a required, you have your scenario, you can start with your required and then go to your scenario. But for me, because I was also I also wrote ITC, it was very difficult for me to just go start with the required, because I think I had to look into the dangers, and I think a friend of mine did a copy. So I was like, you are used to that thing of having to read the scenario first and then you go to the required. Just stick to that. You know the dangers of for me, that I think what he highlighted to me was, if you start with the required, you're going to look at the marks and then there's a mark that has got 40, or there's a question or the required that has got 40 marks, the other one is 20. When you are reading through the scenario, you are going to focus on those required that have got the big marks, and then you miss the other parts. When you said that we need to plan your required, you need to make sure that you maximize or you take those easy marks, you know, so you just miss the point. So for me, I had to make sure that I comprehend the scenario, I apply myself, I do the highlighting and so forth, and then I come back to read the required.
Yeah.
And yeah, the time is also mostly, it's like I think has given us a much time now with IAC. So as an adult that you are, you just make sure that you plan your questions thoroughly, and you need to also learn to move on from questions. I think that is one thing that it was a takeaway with IAC, that since you have all this freedom of your required scenario and everything, you need to learn to move on. Just tell yourself that I've been on this question for quite some time now, I need to move on and go to the next question.
I think I just wanted to comment on the correct approach between the required and the scenario. Because as you said, there's a risk that you look at those required that have the most marks, and then you want to focus on them.
Yes.
And I've heard that through numerous conversations that I've had with people, that the reason why SAICA moved from not giving you your required and giving you reading time and giving you your required, and also the time allocation is actually to improve the marks. So then you just, I think the correct approach then that you can have looking at that is that you use that to your advantage,
Sure.
but you try and make sure that you do not, prioritize questions on or based on marks.
Yes.
Because it can be a bit useful to have the required, at least in my perspective. When I wrote, it was a bit useful for me to have my required, because what I would do is make sure that I read each and every required thoroughly, make sure I understand the assumptions that are built inside the required, because there's some assumptions that they write there on the required to say assume and whatnot, highlight them correctly. But then now, what I don't do is disregard questions, as you said, which is the risk. I then go back, understanding that required A said direct and absorption. What are the tools that I use in direct and absorption? So I need in direct costing, I need all my variable costs and my fixed cost, the distinction between that. So when I'm going to the scenario, I'm looking for everything that says variable or fixed. So I'm going with the right perspective, which is I'm identifying things that help me answer the required that I have. But also I'm not doing that in isolation. I'm not reading the required, I'm done, and then I go back to the scenario, I read and read and read and read. I'm reading the scenario now with the required in mind, but also going back to the required to look for things that will further help me to strengthen my understanding of the entire thing. But then I don't start writing immediately, because that is the risk. Because I look at a required and I think, okay, I've read up until here, all of this information relates to this required, which is a risk. Because the additional information might then impact this required then. So what I'm then doing is I'm still reading the whole scenario, jotting down things, doing some calculations on the paper until I finish, so that I know, even though I have 2 hours left, I know that I can write all the required, because I have a thorough understanding now of the solutions and the required now. So the risk is always, for some people, they're gonna fall into that trap where they say, okay, the biggest required is this, it has the most marks. But for some people, they can use this to their advantage, where they understand that if I look at this, then I can pick up things from the scenario that helps me answer this required. I think for me, that's something that largely helped me, like keeping time management, and making sure I'm to the T when I'm answering the question.
Thank you for that, remember. Now we're going to move to our last round of questions for the panelists. Tosh, your last question is, from the marker's perspective, what are the things that we can do as candidates to make things easier for the marker when marking our papers?
Okay, I think, guys, handwriting, please, like some people are writing like doctors, they're wanting a prescription, you can't even read, right? So please make sure that your handwriting is clear and it's neat. And I think SAICA gives you guys a lot of paper sheets, right? Make use of them. Don't try and now stuff one question in one page. It makes it difficult for us to give you marks, right? So write clearly, neatly, and leave spaces in between. And I think another mistake candidates do, you're referencing to a calculation, for example, you have to maybe calculate a deferred payment, right? Then you say working 1. I'm gonna look through the script. There's no working. But I have to give you marks for those calculations, right? So if you're gonna put a reference, please make sure that the calculation is there, right? And then also, I'm against this, like I said earlier, make sure that you answer all the questions, attempt every question. Because sometimes we'll be looking at required A, it's not there, right? But then we are paging through pages and pages of the script to try and find out, So if you're not gonna attempt it, which I'm against, just write A, not attempted, right? So that you avoid me going and looking at something that is already not there. But attempt every question, like I said, right? And I think another thing, pray for us, guys. Pray for your marker. Like,
the power of that.
The power of
Okay,
prayer.
sure.
I'm telling you, we are humans. SAICA has one of the most credible marking processes.
Sure.
Don't underestimate
Sure.
it. Because when I was a candidate myself, I'd be like, bias rob SAICA. There's no way we are not passing the way that we are not, right? Because I was on the other side. But when I got there, I realized that no, we failed because really, there's nothing that they could have done for us, right? So on a lighter note, when you're done with your script, you know, when she gets there, nothing gets her in the wrong mood or anything like that. She focuses on my paper and gives it the attention that it deserves because she was once in my shoes. I'm not saying pray for me to give you marks when they are not right? But just make sure that you say a little prayer for your marker and honestly give it your best shot. I mean, what else can you do? If it gives you comfort, SAICA is for you passing, then it is against you passing. Right?
Yeah.
I think on the point of prayer, and Tabi, I remember especially paper 2.
And that's the one I was marking.
Your paper 2, I think those who know, they know. Paper 2, I think for me it was difficult, and it was mostly about discussion, and we all know how discussion questions can be. And I think after that, I even posted a status saying, you know. But when I got home, I had to pray. It was not a little prayer. It was not a short prayer. I was like, God, please, just make sure whoever is going to be touching my paper, I want them to soften their heart, like how you have done with Nthabiseng and voila, here I am, an APC candidate. So,
I think also something that you spoke about that strongly resonated with me was the communication. So the idea is I can know everything in that paper, but if I don't communicate that I know, you're not gonna be able to.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the way in which I communicate must inspire to you that I know what I'm doing. So there are some papers that even when you mark, you get a bit discouraged now when you look at it because the presentation is just going off. The calculations are not referenced and so forth. And it even takes you longer to mark than the other papers. I think that is a sign that the person is not communicating well. I mean, you still try your best to mark them as best as you can. But at the end of the day, if they're not communicating it clearly, you're not gonna be able to mark it because you don't have their mind. They can't come to you and tell you, this is what I wanted to say. So I think it's better it comes with exam technique then, understanding that though you know the way, you still need to communicate it in a way that the marker believes that you know what you're doing.
And it's very important to also avoid writing in paragraphs. Because you in a paragraph will just ramble or saying a lot of things and then you just edit again marker. So I think it's very important that they put everything in point forms and make sure that it is straightforward, and you just make sure that your marker smiles when they are marking it.
So the key takeaway here is to make sure that you are communicating clearly and that you are writing in a legible way. Don't write like a doctor. I know you get tired, but like at least do risk exercises so that your hand can just come back. Right? And the last point, remember, prayer changes everything. Make sure that you are praying. If you can't pray, just say, God, divanisa the marks and make it a so that I can just pause. Right? Pray for your markers because, man, they do go through a lot. Remember, your last question is how to overcome the anxiety on the day of the exam and how to remain calm and focused.
This is a big one. I think for me, there isn't necessarily a clear answer because, part of anxiety is there to protect you. It's your brain trying to protect you from, any possible danger that the brain is conceptualizing. So I think the things that can help you is writing or attempting in a way that brings you some form of comfort. So I think your anxiety lessens the more you write, the more you do things that bring you back to a comfort situation. So I think for me, doing all of that I just said, that reading the scenario, looking at the required, reading the scenario guide, reading the required, it's given me comfort. Because before that date, all I knew was that there are thousands possibilities in which this can be tested. There are 1,000 diversity of questions that can come about: tax, Menfin, financial accounting. But now on the day of the exam, it's just 120. And I can see, I know exactly what they're testing now. Those possibilities have been lessened to maybe 5 or 6. So you know exactly what is being tested. So for me, the comfort day was always the date of the exam. Because on the day of the exam, I know exactly what they tested. And the trick was always, yes, you know, I've went through CTA. I've been doing this since undergrad. There's no way I don't know anything about that specific requirement. They can hit me on the technicalities. Maybe one item where I need to, maybe in accounting, I need to find in loyalty programs, I need to calculate the performance obligations and then, you know, multiply by the percentage. Maybe I've forgotten that. But I know exactly the trajectory in which I need to follow, and that is important for me. Because this paper, I'm only gonna see it once. If I fail now, if I don't attempt, I have to think about other 1,000 possibilities in which they can test the other IAC that I'm going to write. So it's better to understand, here it is, this is the paper. What do? I do the best thing that I can with the best knowledge that I have at that point. So I still attempt all the questions and I don't rank. I don't say, look, I'm bad in IFRS 15. I'm underprepared in IFRS 15. No. Some principles and some knowledge you learn in the exam, literally. So there are some things that I also learned in the exam to the point of even maybe getting a distinction on that specific test that I've been given. But when I go out, I tell everyone, look, I didn't know anything here. All I knew is there's this and there's this. How do I then, you know, maybe write close to what the solution might be? Because you might find that whatever you're stressing about when you're writing there, it's stressing the whole group. Everybody's stressing about it. And you think it's just you. But the other group, you know, the difference between you and the person who's writing close to you might be the fact that they attempt. They don't just leave it to, you know, I'm underprepared. They still do that question. And then they write the best thing that they can. You, on the other hand, just leave it and say, you know, I'm underprepared, I'm not going to attempt this. But that person maybe gets principal marks. Because sometimes even what matters is the structure. You know, we spoke about the direct and absorption and whatnot. The question might be difficult. But what is the question? It's still a direct and absorption question. Still with the same tools. What do? You separate variable and fixed. That's all you do. Yes, maybe you might not get 100% there. But you can come up with a 3 or a 5 out of 10. And that's good enough because the other ones will compensate for that. So I think for me, just understanding that is the chance that you have and maximizing that chance. Somebody else doesn't have it. So just, you know, deal with it then, and then it's over.
I love that.
I would also like to add on what Remember said. For me, I think Dosh mentioned something about prayer. And prayer does not only start when you are praying for the marker or praying on that day, but it starts on when you are preparing for your exams, right? And then I think the first thing that was really helped me was, because it was the first time writing IAC, and I'm like, how am I, what is this? What is going on? What can I expect? But I think the moment they put all the scripts and everything in front of me, I closed my eyes. And then I was like, God, you know me. I have asked you to help me remember these things. And then now that time has arrived. Please be umkhumbuzi wami. You know, and I think it just calmed me. And I'll just breathe in, breathe out. When I open the question and go through the required, I had to make sure that I read the required 2 or 3 times and even break it down. We are required to break down. To or critically evaluate. I already know when they say critically evaluate, what is it that I'm expected to do. But I had to break it down. The valuation, and when I look at the valuation, it's a free cash flow. I already know answers because you need to break down your required. Because if you read through and then we are cowless, I have not but calculate, or you need to discuss, and then that's just going to be something that later on you realize that I was supposed to discuss. So you need to make sure that whenever you do a short prayer, you do those breathe-ins and breathe-outs, and then when you are reading, you comprehend with the question, and also you break down the required.
Then I think another thing with anxiety, sometimes you get anxiety not because you are scared,
Yes.
but because this is so important to you
Yes.
that you really, really want to do well. So don't look at anxiety in a negative way.
Sure.
Just look at it as I'm sitting here and this particular situation right now has the potential to change my life. And honestly speaking, like you said, remember, there's nothing new there.
Yeah.
You got through CTA, you got through undergrad. If you just remember what I learned, if it's a group question, what is an acquisition journal? How does it look like?
Yes.
Apply the basic principles that you have. It boosts your confidence and you are able to build on to the more challenging topics. Attempt everything. Don't leave anything unattempted. I think for me, that's key.
I think also it's a thing of, anxiety comes sometimes because you have to tell yourself that you deserve this first for that to go out.
Yes.
So if you don't continuously tell yourself and remind yourself of all the reasons why you deserve to pass, of course anxiety is gonna cripple you.
Of course.
Because if you don't believe that you deserve it, how can you move? How can you tell your body to do the things that it needs to do if you already believe that you don't deserve it?
Yeah.
And also something that this other girl told me last year during CTA. So she had failed CTA and she was repeating. And I was always stressing the entire time. My marks went even as bad as hers, but I was always stressing, I was always anxious, as you said, because it was that important for me that I passed. But she said something that's very powerful. She said, I believe that if God wants this for me, then He will do it for me.
Of course.
So therefore, all I need to do is prove to myself that I deserve this thing.
Of course.
And all the rest, all the other things that could potentially go wrong, I just need to leave it to God. I do my best and leave the rest to God.
Yeah.
And if maybe you don't believe in God, leave the rest to the universe. Because at the end of the day, if you deserve it, it's gonna come to you.
Of course.
And I mean, if you're feeling anxious, sometimes just drink water.
Breathe.
Drink water, take the paper, put it face down, say a little prayer, and then do breathe in, breathe out like you mentioned, and just go back. Take 5 minutes to yourself to just recollect yourself.
And also, Nthabi, sorry to cut you. I think another thing that works best is when you look at the required and you see those questions that I know this one, I know this one, I know this one. They boost your confidence, and even if you start with them, proper planning, most especially on required, you number one, this is gonna be number 2 on my answering. So that when you get to all the other questions, you already have your confidence because you started the questions that you're very confident about. Thanks.
And then the last question for you, Lou, is dealing with the strain that preparing for exams has on your relationship with your friends, your family, and the loves of your life.
How many are there?
Oh no! Again, this question is very funny because I think one thing from my CTA lecturers, what they said is that when you are in this journey, more especially with IAC, because it's very important. It's very important that you call your family to say, hey, guys, listen, I am preparing for IAC as you know, and it's gonna take a lot. And also I am working as well. That you cannot take away from, we cannot forget about it, that I am working, and also if I am not working, I need to make sure that I focus on my studies. You can check up on me or send a text. I won't reply immediately, but when I get a chance, or maybe when I'm about to sleep, I'll just go through. And also, you cannot just get to be able or to reply to everyone. You know your people that okay, I can respond to my parents, I can respond to the love of my life, and So also, if just make sure the person that you're in a relationship with, they also get to understand. Because otherwise the relationship is IAC relationship. So if your person, they would understand that this is what you are doing and all they can do is just to support you, I think that is the most important thing. Just communicate with them. Make sure that they understand how much this means to you. And also now, as a person, you need also just to go back to say, why am I doing this? If you understand your why, and then I'm telling you, you are going to be able to live without your phone, put your phone aside, You only get to be able to go through your phone after you have done your sessions, your study sessions. And the people that are in your life, they have to understand. If I can understand it, they must move along. You know, you will catch up with them at some point, because this means much for you. And to tell you the honest truth, it is the best feeling to get that IAC. The best feeling ever, and I don't want you to miss on that, because after when you get those results, you know that you are going to be an APC candidate.
Come on. And I think it's very important, because I like telling people that I'd rather suffer for like the few months, you know, for a lifetime of pleasure, because now, like Lou mentioned, you're going to be an APC candidate. And the first thing I said when I got my ITC results is that I'm not going back to Gallagher, I'm not going back to CTA. Yeah, that's one thing I didn't want to go back to. CTA was the worst year of my life. And when I got the results, I'm like, you know what, I'm not going back to CTA. And the next time Gallagher will see me is when I'm passing APC. And so just make sure that, you know, you're telling your family and your friends that, listen, this is an important thing for me, and they just need to support you, because you need that support structure, you know, in your life. So don't surround yourself by people who are stressing you, who are adding onto the stress of, you know, the exam itself. Just make sure that you're silencing all the noise. Yes, Lou?
A mentor of mine, I think Kumani, would normally say that you only get to pass CTA when you pass IAC.
Yes.
Now that you're still a kid on IAC, CTA is not done yet. You only put the nails on the coffin when Saka said, congratulations, you have passed IAC, and they knew that you will never go back to CTA. So it is the best feeling ever.
I think also on something that Lou was saying about their relationships and them moving along if they don't, you know, I mean, it all comes back to values.
Of course.
And whether that person understands what you value in your life. Because at the end of the day, one person with their own purpose, they have their own purpose. So this relationship is just something that comes after that. You still have to have something that, you know, dictates how you live your life. You still have to have something that you follow, which is a purposeful life. So you can't make maybe a relation. Yes, maybe some people do make relationships their purpose, but you need to have a primary purpose. And if you could see that, you know, from the onset that, you know, this person doesn't understand, and you keep on forcing, and you keep on trying to make them understand, at the end of the day, that only cripples you, because after 3 days, then they texting on some, so hey, you are always busy, hey, you don't check me on, but you've already, you know, at the beginning of everything said that, you know, I'm in a very difficult period. You know, I'm studying, my time is limited, but they keep on not understanding. And the time that it hits you then, it would then be too late, because you should have solved that problem. Or where the person, you're communicating the value, but the person doesn't understand that the value that is being communicated.
And I think it's always best to study with a pure heart, because now imagine you're studying with a broken heart, you won't concentrate. So just make sure that you have priorities. And your priorities must be getting, you know, to the CA designation, because it is worth it. But that brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you so much, everybody, to the panel, for just taking your time to just give your expertise on the IAC exam. So that brings us to the end of our episode, and I hope that you guys thoroughly enjoyed it. And just know that as you're preparing for your June exam, or even if you're watching it for the January sitting, just know that you are capable and you are competent, and it will begin in CASA. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.